Okay, so today I'm dissecting a cow eye. I have two cow eyes here. Probably only going to dissect one. I'll just use the other one for reference to kind of go over some of the structures once I've opened up one of them. So I'm going to use mainly, this is a pretty simple dissection today, but I'm going to use mainly a scalpel, a scissors. This is actually one of the easiest ways to open up the eye once you have an incision. And then I'll probably use this little tweezers here to pull some things apart and to point at some things. And those are my main tools for today. So what I'm going to do is just start by pointing out some of the structures that we can see on the outside here. So we see a lot of adipose tissue. And this adipose tissue is to basically create a cushion in a socket, and that socket there is actually a moose. It's not a cow, but you can see of similar size animals as far as the head and everything. This eye is probably of similar size for the moose, so you need this big fat pad to protect around the eye. As we know, it moves throughout our lifetime and we want it to be protected, so that fat pad is there for that reason. Now we'll also see some tissue that looks a little bit different, and I know I saw some on this. So this right here is actually skeletal muscle. So this is one of the extrinsic muscles of the eye. This is what's going to allow us to pull the eye in a certain direction to point or aim the eye. So looking at that front area here, this is actually going to be called the cornea. So this is the main structure that we think about when we look at somebody's eyes. We're actually looking at their corneas. And then back over in this area, it's called the sclera. So that's going to be the protective layer that's up against the eye inside of what we would see with inside of somebody's eyelids. So then moving to this posterior portion here, we're going to look for a different tissue type again, and I can see that adipose tissue. This is a good demonstration of what the adipose tissue feels like and looks like, but then I see this little nerve right there, and that's actually going to be the optic nerve. So that is what's going to transmit signals, the beginning of our sensory pathway for vision. The optic nerve is going to connect to the optic disc inside the eye. And if I come back to the front here, what I want to do now is I want to remove some of this fat from the outside. So I think I'm going to keep, let's see, I think I'll keep this eye intact and I'll open this one up. So what I'm going to do first is just kind of use the scissors here. There's a lot of material that we're trying to remove, and we can do it faster with less danger of cutting ourselves than with a scalpel going like this. And I want to try to leave that optic nerve intact as well as I'm going through here. But I'm just trying to make as quick work as I can of the other structures, the extrinsic muscles. And there's another one. So you can see that real skeletal muscle look. Those tissues right there. Okay, so there I have quite a bit of the fat pad, the cushion, as well as the extrinsic muscles removed. Pretty happy with where we're at there. Now, what I'm noticing is that there's fluid inside of this anterior portion, and there's also fluid in the posterior portion. Now, when I open that up, that's going to be, it's going to come out in both areas. And what I'll do first is I'll actually go into the anterior portion of the eye here. And So I'm going to cut into the anterior portion of the eye here, and there is fluid contained both in the anterior portion. You can actually see that fluid pushing on the eye as I push on the sides here. This is going to be called aqueous humor in the anterior portion in front of the lens, and in the posterior portion we have what's called vitreous humor. So if I cut into the cornea here, and this is never one of my favorite things to do because I do expect fluid to come out. I also don't like the tough feel of cutting into an eye. But there's a nice little incision. That's going to get me in there, and I'm just going to remove this anterior portion now using my scissors here. And you can really tell how tough the cornea is when I cut through that area, and I'm cutting through the cornea and then the sclera right back up on top of that. And if I just open this up at this point, right here I can actually see that anterior portion is right there. What we can see behind this, the lens is right there, and you can see I actually cut in through the posterior portion as well. So the way that this would be connected is just like that. So that's the anterior view right there. And what we're seeing there is called the ciliary body. So this is when you're looking at somebody's eyes, this is the color that you think of as their eyes being. So right here, you're looking at the ciliary body, and right inside there is the lens. Now this is of course how we're going to control how much light is getting into the eye. So that ciliary body is going to move to allow light to get into the lens. Now if I just remove the ciliary body from there, right there I can see the lens. And then in this posterior portion, that's a vitreous humor. So the lens is right there. Let's leave that intact. And just look to the back here. So this vitreous humor, we see it all through the back there. And aqueous humor was in the anterior portion here. Now that lens is in pretty good shape. I'm just going to try to remove that. And then it's always interesting to feel what the lens feels like. It's a whole lot harder than you'd imagine. And in this preserved specimen, it's even harder than it would be if this was a fresh eyeball. Now this, of course, can change in shape as we get older. This becomes stiffer and not able to move as much, so that hurts how well our vision works as we get older. Now, if I look back in this area, I'm actually going to cut away some of this anterior portion here. Okay. Now, what I actually did there was I moved away this layer right here. So, while we have this intact, I'm going to see where the area is that it actually is connected, and right back there, when I look on the posterior side, you can see that's what connects to the optic disc. So that optic disc is going to be connecting to the optic nerve back here. So that would be the area inside the eye that we think of as the blind spot. Okay, so when I push this membrane out of the way, that's actually part of the retina. So that is going to be this delicate white membrane right there. This, going back from there, we actually have, specific to a cow's eye, or actually ungulate eyes, so any hooved animals that have to see better at night, and also some predators, we'll have what's called a tapetum lucidum. And the tapetum lucidum is actually going to have, this is going to be the area where we have a lot of our photoreceptors. And what will happen is light will pass through here, it'll hit the tapetum lucidum, and it'll reflect back on the rods. So basically, that's giving us better night vision, and that's a specific structure to animals that need to be active at night or see at night. And then again, right there, we're seeing where the optic disc would be. We can tell this connection here of this delicate white part of the retina, and there we are going to see the optic nerve coming off the posterior side. So going from the outer portion in, we have the sclera. Looking back here, the optic disc is right there. This is going to be part of the choroid coat, and that contains the tapetum lucidum right there. And then on top of there, we have what we think of as the delicate membrane that is going to be overlying that choroid coat.